Well, as some of you know, I've been cranking out videos like crazy this last month. I've been with Grasshopper for about a year and a half for Rhino modeling, and I go back and forth from showing really creative stuff without too much explanation. I try to keep videos really short, but I also have been trying to run over every single node offered, and even though I skipped a few in the params, I think I've covered everything from math, sets, vectors, and now I'm into curves. And we're into curves, and I went from primitives over to splines. So I basically want to get every one of these nodes working. I wish I had a script like this when I started so I could at least look at it instead of pulling out a node and then wondering, oh my gosh, what are the inputs, what are the outcomes? I don't always get it figured out perfectly, but these little test samples, I think they're great little renderings to show evidence of understanding. And once you get these basics down, I mean, I haven't even gone into surfaces, meshes. Well, I have to make other work, but transformations, all that gets applied. If you understand the maths, the sets, the vectors, and really some of these basis of what NURBS curves are in here, it can be really, really exciting to build some incredible smooth geometries that blend and have beautiful continuity. That said, we're going to jump into here. I'm probably going to stay on perspective view, downsize that as much as I can so we can see the script, and I'll bring up Grasshopper and keep my face out of it as best I can. Probably slide over here. So basically, you're going to go on in, and the first things you're going to find is you've got Bezier span, which is, if you go into GraphMapper, you'll kind of understand the shape of the Bezier curve. If you don't know what I'm talking about, jump on over to Inputs, GraphMapper, and where you right-click, it says Graph Types, you can pull in a Bezier curve, and that's going to give you basic control, very similar to what you can make in a Bezier span. And in doing that, what I've done is I've populated geometries. I'm going to take this off. I've kept my count fairly low at 12. I've pulled out a list item index to grab points, and I plug in a certain amount of start point, start tangents, end points, and end tangents, and you end up with a Bezier span. And if you start playing with these and switching them out, you're going to change your curves around. Of course, you can't really see what's going on here. It's kind of nuts. But that's basically to get one of those working. Interpolate's awesome. You just grab a bunch of points, and I think that's coming out from down here. A selection of points that I grabbed, 4 of them coming off of this list item, put them into the vertices, and boom, you're there. You can play with the degrees, the periodic, and the knot style, but we'll leave that because you'll basically be doing this to pull curves out of points. Interpolate T, which is, I think it applies tangents, yeah. You basically are scripting and making pretty cool geometries out of a start and end, and then a vertice, and the amount of vertices. And I'm pulling how many points out? 4 points again in the vertices, and then I'm finding a start and end to those. So I'm just grabbing any point here for the start and end, and I end up changing up these curves from points. So when you start to think about what this is doing, it starts kind of staying the same, not changing it too much. But you get your interpolate tangent working. Kinky curve is pretty cool. It's got vertices coming in, 12 of them, and it's grabbing, you can change up your degree, 0, 1, 2, 3 degrees, and you can change up the angle on each one of these. Kink angle threshold in radians is set at, for this one, 0.0. I have to wonder what happens if I type in a different degree angle. I'm not sure. I think I figured I'd crash it out or it would do something. I don't think it'll do anything. But it does really nothing for the kinky curves for me, a little subtleties. But basically it makes a very kinky curve. So instead of interpolating all through, it kind of jams it all up on angles. NURBS curves are pretty awesome. They're a little smoother. You play with the degree, and the same thing is I pulled a bunch of, I think I pulled all 12 out of there and then ran them into the NURBS curves. Just really nice, smooth geometries. We'll try and apply these a little bit and certainly understand these as we bring them into surfaces. PolyArc, pretty awesome tool. You basically start with vertices. I started with these 4 vertices, and then I have a tangent that's been set here. I have to think, what was I doing with that? How did I get those numbers in there? 3 locally fied. I guess they come, no, they're inputs. Closed and open. I haven't played enough with the PolyArc. What happens when I start to change up the points that go into these vertices? There's a lot less a poly-arc coming off of each one of these points. Kind of a strange little thing to think about. Multi-arcs that end up closing up all the points. Pretty interesting geometry. Polyline you'll use quite a bit. It'll be pretty straight points between all of those lines. So if you grab those, if you grab the 12, you're going to get that hard polyline surface like that we've seen. The tangent curves are pretty cool because what I did was I grabbed those points and I grabbed the point plane normals. And then of course, the tangent's coming straight up. So I'm able to take those vertices and start to throw them around in a pretty awesome three-dimensional mode. Whereas those points are planar. I'm not sure what will happen if I hook in all these guys. Nope, it's saying no. So obviously I had something going on there, too many. The 4 were working as the vertices, and yeah, there they are, kind of running through all of those point normals, tangents. You can do some blending, and I played with that a little bit from 0.5. I'm going to run that to 1. I think I took it back off because I wasn't having much luck with it. Let's grab it on there and see what happens. Yeah, you're just playing with that amount of pull and push up on those normals. And you don't have to reparameterize any curves because you're dealing with points. All right, now it gets a little interesting. Populate, 3D population I did here. I sorted my points, which I like to use. I hadn't been using that for a while, but that's a nice little item. If you hold down Control-Alt, you'll see where that's hidden in your vectors right at the very last part of the vectors in the point tab. And then I built a surface from there. It's a pretty cool, wild, wiggly surface. And what I did with that surface was I decided to do a curve on surface. And I found that curve by choosing 3 different... Now, if you think about this, I've got that surface and these points, and I'm able to... It might be a little hard to see on this one. Look on the top view. And zoom right in there. You'll see that I can control in 3 dimensions using MD sliders. If I don't miss it, yeah, I can control a curve that's actually sitting on that, following, if I reparameterize that surface, a really cool structure that's on that surface. Talk about piping it, capping it, and doing a Boolean as separation from that surface. So I'm really going to be using this curve point, and I think I can maybe show it here a little bit if I can rotate it. It's just I've got such big geometries on here. Yes, Ella. Oh, thank you. I've got real berries from the woods. Lucky me. But I'm already at 7 minutes. So let's keep rolling. What I have here is a geodesic curve, and that's something that comes from, I pulled out these points, and I'll just show you where they are on here at this point and this point. So ignore the other 2. They're kind of hard to see. And let me go back into here. Thank you, Ella. Thank you. That's enough for me. Basically, I've got my 2 points, that one and that one, my start and end, and I have a surface I brought in because of that. So the surface has been actually manipulated and brought in as a geometry, so I can bake that. And so I inputted that. I played with the surface, set it off of something, but I found a way to do start and end points to pull a line off that actually sits on that surface, which is pretty cool if you think about it. That curve is actually sitting on that surface. Kind of hard to see there. Maybe because I have it off. No, it should be fine if I take this. Oh, I've got too much going on. Basically, that surface is what I'm playing with. And then I can pull that line. You just see that faint blue line that stays there. And this gets really cool because now I'm going to do a curve. I'm going to take the isocurves on top of that surface, and I can play with them and have control over those as UV points. And then what I can do is I can bring them into an intersection. I just took them over via dispatch them into a line. So those 2 lines stay close to, my daughter's kind of coughing a little bit. Those 2 are kind of jutting through. They're not on the surface, but they're there. But I also took those isocurves and I took them into a loft. So I can loft smaller sections and have incredible control over pulling smaller panels off of a surface, which is pretty cool. And that's just through using the isocurves, which is a tool you're going to see used so many times. And then I actually piped 2 of those lines, which if you pair it with that loft, that's a pretty cool piece of geometry that you have parametric control over. And so now you're getting into some pretty cool surfaces just from a surface edited form. I did the same with the U and the V, grabbed here, and you can see I went that way as well. So if you grab them all, I haven't quite remedied this because you see there's a straight kind of line that comes across here from the U and V directions. But I'd like to slowly figure out what I want to do with that. But very exciting to start using the isocurve tools with the MD sliders, and then multiple MD sliders, and then surface normals, and evaluate surfaces. It gets very exciting. Watching the time, we're almost 10 minutes. What I did was I populated again a surface. I grabbed my points. I interpolated because I had to show you interpolate curve and a subcurve. pretty awesome domain. From 0 to 1 after reparameterized, I pick and choose what I want from that curve. What a way to start editing curves. I also grabbed the points, these 3 points, I stuck them into a interpolated curve, and I did a tween curve. So not only between this curve and this curve, I found the tween curve. And the tween curve I set a factor on of how much do I want it to be that curve and how much do I want it to be that curve. Now that should make you just, your whole stomach tingle, because that's pretty darn exciting to what's happening there, and having control on tween curves and name mounts and things like that. This one I put in red because it's so dangerously cool. Let's zoom back out. What we have are 2 curves that I brought in, and I brought in all these points, so you can ignore these little guys here. I've got all these points in order, and I have a count of 8 of them that match the amount of points that I inputted here. So over here I have 8 points, and there's their locations. Then over here I grab the weights off of, and you can't really see it in the red, I apologize for that. Let's ungroup. Those weights came out, but I thought, why is the weights only giving data to the... Oh, I had to input those. So I had to match the number of points to the weights. So you're thinking of an interpolated curve. This curve is going to be made, and that's in 3 dimensions too. It's up and down. As long as the numbers remain the same, there is a periodic true or false that you can add here. And then you've got these not vectors, which I was like, what are not vectors? Well, I ended up applying them and putting them into here. And I end up with this really controllable, really controllable curve. You can think about the points on the curve and then wanting to slowly pull them by knots up to the curves. And of course, what you want to see is what I'm talking about as points. And it might be best to look at another angle, but I'm going to keep doing this. If I put on the true factor, I get the same kind of, I get a different data that doesn't stick to the ends. That comes in from the ends, if you notice. But you're starting to have real control over what NURBS curves actually are being suggested when you're working in different degrees. I would get a Rhino for 6. Ron Cheng's book's pretty amazing, but if you can start to wrap your head around NURBS, that's pretty exciting. I didn't mean that. I'm just going to ungroup that. What we have going down here, and there's a lot going on here when it comes to the knot vector and how you're controlling a curve with your weights, your knots, and your points. And you get into kinky points, or kinky knots, I guess, whatever they're called when they turn at sharp angles. This is a great tool as well. You grab yourself a curve, you grab yourself another curve. What I might do for this last section, because we are running out of time, is just take everything and put it off, disable off, and then come down in here. I think I said off, yeah. And then come down in here and show what's going on, put this all on. And what I have here is I can grab this curve and this curve. Those are my 2 at the start. And what I'm doing, if you watch this, is I'm going to a blend curve surface from this bulge and this bulge. So if I'm looking at those 2 curves coming together, and it might help if I take these guys. Well, I'll just put this on and make sure I click the 2. These 2, with this tool, I have some total control over the bulging of what I want to do with those things and how I want to pull them and how I can behave, which is very cool. If I grab these items here, which rely on that as well, and just take off this one, you'll see that on these 2 curves, 1, 2, I can have a point, which is located here, and I have a chance of changing up the continuity on both of these, and you should know the difference between a 1 continuity to a 0 continuity to a 2 continuity. And that's kind of cool how that ends up becoming a work. And then here, I've grabbed this point, and this is just catenary. And since I'm not in top view, I changed the direction of gravity. So I basically can grab between those points and have control over the power of bringing down this catenary arc. And then the last one is a tool I'm going to use all the time. It basically grabs both these curves, and between them, it can take those curves and do a connection between them. Now, you can just connect one of them to itself, which is kind of cool. You can connect the other one to itself, and you have really cool control over the bulging of what you're doing with that as it joins to itself. And you can have closed or open when you're doing it. So I have not been using the Connect Curves tool, and I really have to get into there because I think my organic geometry is really going to stand to benefit from all that. That's enough said. Let's take the whole thing, hit Enable, hit Preview On, and hit group and make it a nice, lovely blue, because I wish somebody had sent me this when I was starting out